Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to be spending our second day on Unit 5.6, looking at government's role in industrialization. So our learning objective is to explain the causes and effects of economic strategies of different states and empires. And yesterday we went through, or in our last video, we went through a case study with Egypt, right? And let's just kind of, since we're looking at different parts of the world through industrialization, let's just kind of look at a couple of images and try to extract some, assertions from these kinds of things, right? So this is looking at the approximate number of shipping vessels and percentage of world trade by the region, right? Looking at 1874 to 1880. All right. So, we can see here sailing vessels, right? Steamships, and the percentage of world trade, right, and who is controlling that. So based on what we've already looked at, right, if I were to ask you something like, if we were to look at these exact same numbers in 1900, let's say, for example, or 1914, right, for an example, where would you expect to see some changes, like some growth? What region would have seen some growth between 1880 and 1910, 1914 or so? All right, and I would think most of my students, and hopefully you at home will be able to identify probably Asia, right? So, and of course, if I were to, we were to kind of dig a little deeper on that, why specifically would Asia have seen? Why do you believe they would see an increase? We could look at some of the implications of the Meiji period in Japan. It could be the easiest way to do that. All right. I think you can also assume that the United States is also going to see an increase during this time frame as well, between 1880 and the turn of the 20th century and the first decade or two of the 20th century. North America is also going to see an increase, right, in its percentage of world trade. All right, one other little quick thing, just looking at this map. This is a map showing British, Spanish, Dutch trade routes, right, shown by ship logs from 1750 to 1800. When I look at this in class, one of the first things I do with this map is I ask if we had a map of showing ship logs around the year 1900, right? What would be different? What would be a change on this map? Right. So go ahead and look at this map. Think about that, because this is actually something we did in class. Where do you think the change would be on this map? All right. So after kind of looking at it for a minute, most students identify. Well, most will say the Panama Canal. Right. And I'll say no to that because the Panama Canal does not actually go live until 1914. So if we're using 1914, yes, you would see Panama Canal, but before 1914, let's just say, and most of my students remember that the Suez Canal opens up in around 1869 or so. So because of the Suez Canal and because the British is now a colonizer, right? So we have the establishment of the British Raj down here. You're going to see an intensification of activity, going through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean and up. So that would have been a major difference, right? And if we're looking for a second major change in this map around 1900, one of the ones most students get really quick is Japan, right? So Japan has very little trade in 1880. Really, they're 10 years into the Meiji Restoration at that point in this industrialization. Their merchant fleet is still very small, so and their number of factories is still very small. So there's just not a lot of activity I'm sorry, 1800. I'm sorry, this is still Tokugawa at this point. So so this is Japan would be a major change, obviously. All right. Kind of looked at the Ottomans in the last class, so just kind of couple of reminders. Problems in the empire, right? The Ottoman Empire. Ethnic nationalism is beginning to rise. And this is going to become a major thing as far as the resistance to the Ottomans. And this is something kind of mentioned in class that, when we look at that other slide that had state-sponsored industrialization, and it had Russia and Japan and the Qing dynasty for China and Egypt and Russia, and right where it's one thing to make sure that you understand that there's similarities with the process in the spread of industrialization into those regions, right? So the role that the government plays in industrialization is that similarity, but also make sure you're thinking about some of the differences in those specific places, right? Just to make sure you are able to illustrate that nuanced understanding. So like, for example, places like Japan, right? Countries like Japan did face some resistance to industrialization. There was that series of samurai revolts that we see in the 1880s and early 1890s. Egypt deals pretty effectively with its internal resistance to industrialization by establishing that single buyer system in Egypt. They are able to, kind of prevent the Mamluks from becoming much of a problem. So a lot of the resistance to Egyptian industrialization is actual external resistance, right? It's the British who intervene in the early 1840s and prevent their expansion and possibly conquering of the Ottoman Empire. It's the British who forced them to restrict their navy and their military in the 1840s, and also take away their sovereignty. When England comes in and says that you cannot restrict foreign companies from doing business in your country, that's a violation of sovereignty, right? So another example of an unequal treaty. So in the case of kind of playing with differences. Egypt is facing resistance externally, right? Much more than it is internally, at least until you get into the 1870s and 80s, all right? And then when you get into the 1870s and 80s, you are going to see internal pushback in Egypt against, Westernization policies, and of course, that combined with the debt is going to be the reason why England eventually steps in order to ensure stability in and around the Suez Canal. Right, ethnic nationalism. You're definitely going to see a lot of these issues in the larger, more diverse empires. So the Ottoman Empire and in China, the Qing dynasty. All right, so that's that. Just a little kind of quick review because we're going to kind of be transitioning into different things other than government sponsored in spread of industrialization for the next few classes. All right, so the industrialization started in Britain because of a unique set of circumstances. What should come to mind? Things like their geography, their rivers, close access to the ocean. The demographic changes, that's referring to the organization, the political and economic opportunities because they have an existing middle class, an established merchant middle class, and as well as private property laws. Okay, so these are nice little categories of analysis if you're looking for that. All right, so Industrial Revolution spread from Britain to the rest of Europe and the United States, later spread to places like Japan. As it spread, global share in manufacturing shifted. Europe and the United States mostly follow the British model of industrialization. It's largely brought there by entrepreneurs or the established middle class or merchant class. Russia is slow, right? It's late, right? 1890s before they really kick it into gear and will be incomplete, right? And Japan, state-run, very rapid, right? Industrialization is in response to American growth and, of course, American interaction with them. The Industrial Revolution depends on new technologies, especially the steam engine, which uses coal, a new source of energy. Right. In addition to that, we're going to see that thing being applied out to ships, so steamboats, locomotives, trains. Right. So there's going to be a commercial revolution, not a commercial, transportation and communication revolution that happens as a result. right? And this will intensify during the Second Industrial Revolution. Once you start throwing steel into the mix as well, and widespread steel. All right, government used a variety of strategies from business-friendly policies, little regulation, all the way to direct control in order to facilitate the industrial process. So when we see this kind of government state role in industrial process, right? Sometimes it's direct and explicit, sometimes it's not, right? So business-friendly policies, right, in Great Britain and the United States, like private property rights, for example, right? Government-directed policies of Russia and Japan, right? So very kind of different. Of course, the Ottoman intent to control, right? Kind of really control the industrial development in their country. And even that, they're going to get pushed back, right, from elites within their society. All right, so we have kind of played around with some of these documents, right? And so kind of looking at putting together. We're kind of leading into writing DBQs much more, right? Comes our focus in the last couple of weeks. So our prompt here, evaluate the extent to which Asian governments affected its part of industrialization into their states. We've already read these in class. This is that passage from the Qing. You're welcome to read it if you haven't been in class, but I think we've done it in a previous video. And we've also done this one in a previous video as well, right? So this is so both of these are looking at, the issue of industrialization, right, in Asia. All right, so how would we use the documents? How would we answer this prompt? All right, so assuming you've done that, I have a link for these on Google Classroom as well. If you want to take a few minutes and look at this and come up with an answer. Right, but if you just want to, and this is obviously isn't designed to be a full exemplar, just some basic examples of how you might come up with a claim, right? Such as in many Asian states, such as the Qing and the Ottoman Empire, governments attempt to take direct control over the industrialization process, right? So we're seeing our skill application here is comparison. We're showing similarity, and we're seeing our category of analysis here is the government attempted to take direct control of the industrial process. So good category of analysis, good skill application. And now we're working in these documents, right? Really what is missing here is that kind of explicit explanation, because that's really how you get the point for that. But, just how to actually, how many words to use out of a document or whatnot. This kind of gives you a bit of an example. Here's a starter for sourcing. Still missing that so what, right? You'd have to do that yourself. And of course, a way of working maybe some evidence outside the documents, right? To support this claim that we're working on, if you want to see what that might look like. Okay, so just this is a starter academic paragraph, if you will. All right, so just if you're looking for examples, this is a starter one here for you. All right, so that's about it for today. In our next session, we have a DBQ coming up, and we're going to be doing a modified DBQ. If you're watching this from home, you'll be doing this when you return to class. This will be a makeup assignment we do in class. I think at this point, that's kind of what my plan is. So this is the modified rubric that we're using. Because we're going to be doing, I'm only expecting a one body paragraph, one thesis paragraph, 2 paragraph total answer. So, but this is our first DBQ for an actual test grade, not just like, doing some practice stuff. So let's kind of ease into this and do this a little slower. So here's the rubric, right? Contextualization. Thesis or claim, I do expect 2 separate categories of analysis in order for you to get credit for the thesis point here. All right, so you're only going to be expected to use 1 category of analysis, but I do want to see you have 2 separate categories of analysis. So take what you think is your strongest category of analysis and put that into your body paragraph that you're going to be developing. Right, so using the expectation here is that we're going to be using 2 separate documents in order to support 1 claim, 1 thesis, maximum 2 points. So try to source both of those documents that you're going to be using, and one piece of outside information is on there. So that if you want to earn all the points on this rubric, one piece of outside information, use 2 documents successfully to support your claim. Source both of those documents and contextualize. And of course, I always recommend attempting to contextualize the entire prompt, and then taking a couple of sentences and attempting to contextualize each one of your claims, just to try to maximize your chances of being able to get access to that contextualization point. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. All right, so make sure you are ready. In our next class period to take the DBQ, and if you are home, then this is going to be something that you're going to make up. So feel free to just simply work on a future homework assignment. All right, that is it for today. Sapriati.